So our presenters today are Chris Champagne and Tracy O'Donnell. Both are LaSard facilitators, and LaSard stands for the Louisiana Autism Spectrum and Related Disabilities Project, in case you were wondering. And they're going to elaborate some on that in a moment. I'll let Chris and Tracy tell you more specifically about themselves and their training and experience, as well as the organization. So, ladies, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Tracy O'Donnell. I'm the LaSard facilitator based out of New Orleans. This is my first year with LaSard. I have 20 years of experience, IEP facilitator, classroom teacher, all the way up through resource. So I'm excited to share with you guys some things about how to manage challenging behaviors today.
And my name is Chris Champagne, and I've been with the LaSard Project since 2014. And prior to that, I was at the University of Oklahoma, so I have lots of experience with doing teacher training. And way before that, I was an early interventionist and a preschool teacher. So I've had lots of work with families, helping families since I've been back in Louisiana happily from Oklahoma. And I'm looking forward to talking with you guys today.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. I'm going to share my screen. And like Ms. Blackman said, this is going to be recorded, as well as we're going to be able to provide you with all of the resources that we talk about today, including this slide deck for your use later on and for you to refer to, print, all of it is, you're welcome to it. Okay. So this is our project. I'm about to talk about we're part of the Human Development Center for LSU Health of New Orleans. Here's our new look. We've been through a recent rebranding change. LaSard is the K-12 directive and the initiative that comes out of the Human Development Center, which is part of the LSU Allied Health School. So here's a video. Okay, and so here are all of the programs that we are able to offer, starting with early childhood initiatives, all the way through. Here's our group, the LaSard, we're K-12. We also have the Deaf-Blind Project, as well as the Paycheck Program that works for transitions and post-secondary apprenticeships. We roll into also then later on with employment trainings, as well as we have the WIPA program, and then we move into LEND and the community health section for adults to be able to participate in their community as much as they would like to. So we have a lot at the Human Development Center that are open and available for everyone to participate. Okay, this is our group for LaSard. We took this picture right at Christmas, and you can see all of our facilitators there. And we work all through the state of Louisiana, from the north all the way right at the edge by Arkansas, all the way down to the south and in South Plaquemines Parish. So we're working all over your state to help bring resources to families and to schools. Here are some resources that are for you. This is completely free on our website. Our website is www.lasard.org. And if you click on online resources there in the circle, you will see that there's two blocks that'll come up, one for families and one for educators and community partners. And all of these are the different sections. In there, you're going to find lots of free resources, different visuals that you can utilize with your student, different things that you can utilize for scheduling, for behavior incentives, all sorts of great stuff is in here, and it's completely free. You can also reach out to either Chris or I at any time. We're going to provide you with our contact information at the end of the presentation. And if you're dealing with a certain issue with your child, you can contact us and we can point you in the right direction and give you some resources to help. This is the Google Drive that we were just talking about. So if you will scan that QR code, it will take you to our Google Drive, which is going to give you this slide deck as well as every different document that we talk about today. We're also going to provide that to you later. I believe Ms. Blackman said that she's going to give you a follow-up email since you registered for this webinar, and that will be in there as well. Okay, so today what we're going to do is understand the basics of behavior and effective strategies for dealing with behavior. We also want to recognize key components of quality FBAs, which stands for Functional Behavior Analysis, and BIPs, which stands for Behavior Intervention Plan. We also want to learn some tips and tools for communicating with your school team. So the big idea here is that environment matters, and it matters a lot. So students that are engaged in the learning process are not going to be engaging in challenging behavior. And what we mean by that is that when you're discussing with your school team or you're thinking about your own student at home, one of the things when challenging behaviors come up that you want to really think about is what type of teaching strategies are in place, what type of environmental supports are in place, or what can you add to give your student the support that they need so that they can be engaged in the learning process. Because the more engaged they are in the learning process, the less you're going to see challenging behaviors. So here's your self-assessment. So we're going to also do this at the end. So you're just thinking about this yourself. 1 is 1 to 5. You're going to sort of rank yourself. 1, you're new to this and you have no idea about behavior basics. 3, you have some understanding. That's like middle. And 5, you are an expert and you can teach other people about behavior basics. So I just want you to sort of have that number in your head. And then we're going to reassess at the end. So functions of behavior, that's where we're going to start. So this is what we know. If a student repeatedly engages in a challenging behavior, they're doing it for a reason, right? It's because it's paying off. It's supported by the environment. They're either getting something that they want or they're avoiding something they don't want. All behavior is a form of communication. What happens is students and children and adults, we all learn that specific behaviors is the best way for us to get our needs met. And so some of your children may engage in very challenging behaviors because that's how they get their needs met, especially if they can't necessarily vocalize what it is that they want or don't want. Also, we can understand how to intervene most effectively if we identify the function. Another word for function is the purpose of behavior. In that Google Drive, there's also a document of key terms. So things like FBAs, BIPs, function, all of those that I'm mentioning today, you're going to have a whole glossary with definitions and examples at your fingertips. So let's talk about the ABCs of behavior. And A stands for antecedent, which is what happens before the behavior occurs. We also call that a trigger. B is what is the behavior itself. And C is that consequence. What happens after the behavior? What's the outcome? A consequence can be positive or it can be negative, depending on what the behavior is. So the purpose for identifying the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence is because if we identify the behavior and we can identify the antecedent, we can usually figure out what the consequence is. So here's an example. The behavior is that Cassie runs out of the room. What happened right before Cassie ran out the room? That's the antecedent. The paraeducator asked Cassie to check her schedule. Now, Cassie runs out of the room because she doesn't want to do what's coming up on her schedule. It could be something that she doesn't like. Maybe she doesn't like PE. Maybe she doesn't like lunch. Maybe she doesn't like English class or math class because those are very challenging subjects for Cassie. So what happens when she runs out of the room? The next activity is delayed, which means that Cassie avoids what she doesn't want to do. So that consequence makes that behavior pay off, which means she's very likely to do that again. Here's another example. So look at the behavior column first in the middle. Abe grabs the arm of the teacher and bites him. This could also be the parent. So what happened right before that? Abe's teacher told him it was time to leave the preferred activity. For example, maybe Abe was drawing and it was his free time, and the teacher said, it's time, you're done. It's time for us to now do math. And Abe grabs the arm of that teacher and bites them. The teacher's stunned by the bite, and Abe gets to continue to do what he wants. Another example where the consequence, the behavior becomes a payoff and the student gets what they want. Here's one more example for you to see. This is more of students interacting with each other. The behavior is that Gene strips off his clothes. What happens right before that? Gene and his peers finish lunch. So they're in the cafeteria maybe, or they're maybe at home at the table, but Gene and his buddies finish lunch. He strips his clothes off and everybody laughs at him. This particular behavior has a function of getting attention. So he gets the attention that he wants by stripping off his clothes. Gene is probably going to start stripping off his clothes a lot if we can't meet his function that he's receiving and give him attention in another way. All right. So here's how we talk about it, the A, B, and C. We want to intervene at the antecedent before the behavior, where the trigger is. So we have to identify the behavior and the function. Then we have to identify the possible antecedents so we can intervene there so that we don't have to intervene for the consequence. So we want our children to have positive experiences and positive consequences, not negative ones. All right, so putting it together. Now it's your turn. During reading stations, Andy is supposed to work independently on a reading worksheet. Andy throws things, pencils and paper, at his peers and says, "You stink," to the teacher. Other students stop reading and laugh, and the teacher reprimands Andy. So what's the behavior? I'm going to go ahead and tell you guys, since we only have 45 minutes. The behavior is that the student throws pencil and paper at his peers, and the student says, "You stink," to the teacher. Second thing you want to identify is that antecedent. What was the antecedent? The student's given independent work. And then what's the consequence? The peers laugh at the student. Oops. The peers laugh at the student, and the teacher reprimanded Andy. Okay, so why do we really care about figuring all that stuff out and identifying that? Because behavior is functional. It's a form of communication, and it definitely has a function. All of it does. So what are some possible functions to think about? The two main ones: what's the student gaining access to, or what's the student avoiding or escaping? That's the two big functions of behavior. So challenging behaviors, if they're going to obtain or get something or escape or avoid something, they could be trying to get something that's tangible, or an activity, an iPad, TV time, a game that they really like. They could also be trying to get attention, like our buddy Gene ripping his clothes off. They could also be trying to have sort of a sensory feeling that they really need, and that's kind of automatic. Or they could be trying to escape a certain tangible or activity. My own son likes to escape cleaning his room and will do just about anything that he possibly can to not pick up. They could also try to escape attention. If there's a certain individual or a person that they maybe don't want to fool with or don't want to be around. For your children at home, a lot of times that can be a sibling. And then they can also be trying to escape a feeling if they're having a sensory overload, maybe too much light, too much noise. If you're in a family with a lot of children like we have, it can be very, very noisy. And if you have a child that has any type of hearing sensitivities, that can be difficult sometimes for them. So positive reinforcement is going to be really, really good for what is a student trying to achieve. So if the function of the behavior is to achieve something, then that's going to be a positive reinforcement to give them something really positive that they want. If the student's trying to avoid something, that's what we call a negative reinforcement, to get away from something or to escape it. Now, some common functions. If you're going to, some peer attention, adult attention, a desired activity, different objects or items, toys that they really like, or again, that sensory stimulation, auditory and tactile. The reason that we're spending so much time discussing these functions is because when we get to what to do about those challenging behaviors, you got to know the function and you've got to know why they're doing it so that you can teach a replacement behavior and give them different reinforcers. So, or they're going to try to avoid something like a difficult task, something that bores them. Homework, we are all trying to avoid that usually. Something that maybe is too easy, physical demands, something that they don't want to do, certain peer staff. And sometimes they're trying to escape. They know they maybe got in trouble that day at school, or they know that maybe they have some guilt for something that they've done, maybe a bad choice that they've made, and they really don't want to be reprimanded for it, which I totally understand because I don't want to be reprimanded ever. So that might be why they're trying to avoid something. So one behavior can also serve multiple functions. Here's what I'm talking about: hitting. Hitting can be for gaining sensory input. It can also be for escaping a difficult task, gaining attention, or gaining access to something tangible, like a game. So one behavior could have multiple functions. That's kind of the trick of this whole thing, figuring out what the function is. Eloping or running away from something, they could be trying to escape loud noises if they have sensory sensitivities, escaping something that's boring or that they don't want to do, gaining a tangible by going to another classroom or to another place, like going to their big sister's room to get that thing that they really want, that certain stuffed animal, or gaining an attention by an adult because they like to be chased. We see this in schools all the time where students are running down the hall and they're being chased by like 6 adults and they are laughing and giggling and they're having the greatest day because they're getting exactly what they want. So think about that sometimes. Sometimes students run, or your children might run, because they want to play chase. And then screaming. That's something that's very common. Sometimes students scream because they're just overloaded. They might want to escape something that they don't really like, or they're protesting, and that's the easiest way for them to protest. They could also scream to try to get attention from you or from another peer, or gaining access to a tangible item. Think about it this way. We are born screaming to get our needs met. That's what babies do when they don't have a language. So children can also do that if they get what they want or they get their needs met by screaming. Okay, and I'm going to turn it over to Chris now, and she's going to talk about collecting observational data. I'm going to stop. I'm going to actually just keep going. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay. Excuse me. So here's an example, and we're going to just show you this. This is an example of a good ABC data collection sheet. So when we go in, for example, into the classroom, we looked at what setting is it? Because a lot of times behaviors occur in certain settings and don't occur in other settings. So one of the things we always do is we want to see where it's going well, because where it's going well means that somehow that environment has it together. But when we go in, we like to get what that antecedent, what was the trigger, what was the behavior, and what was the consequence. So this is just a simple table that people can use just to chart those things. And you can do the same thing with behaviors at home. Some of the typical ones might be homework, might be getting off the iPad, which we see at school and at home. And so some of the things may be pretty clear to you, but you can use this format to help you out with collecting the data. And once you have that, you make a hypothesis, and that's just your best guess. We're just asking you to be a detective, and that's what we're asking our school teams, to be detectives. Do good observations of what's going on, and then you make an educated guess, right? And so when you look at your behavior plans, you should see a hypothesis on there, and that's just their best guess. So when asked to check her schedule, Michaela runs out of the classroom or elopes because she, maybe we noticed it's always before math because she is avoiding math or whatever. Here's another example. When asked to get off the computer, Michaela will yell and throw objects because the teacher will let her stay on for longer. Therefore, the function of the behavior is to gain access to the preferred activity, which is the computer, right? So then once we know that, we need to think about what's a replacement behavior, right? So they need to be efficient and serve the same function. So for example, and I'm going to kind of speed this up a little. So when you decide on that replacement behavior, it has to be something that the student can use efficiently and effectively. And then it needs to be taught, right? It needs to be easy. So for example, in that case with Michaela, if Michaela starts fussing about getting off of the computer because she doesn't want to, maybe she could be taught to say 1 more minute, please. And then that would give her the same result, right? She'd get more time on the computer, but she's asking in a very effective way. Or maybe she says 5 more minutes and you say only 1 and you set a timer. And then maybe you have another fairly preferred activity that she's going to do after the computer. So that's just a tip. So we're going to talk about phases of behavior. And this is the anxiety curve. I don't know how many people have seen this, but this is true of all of us. When we go through anxiety or stress, we have a point where it starts by some kind of trigger or antecedent. And then if certain things don't happen, then we can continue all the way up that curve to the peak point, which is 5, and stay there for some amount of time before we then begin to come down, right? To calm or whatever. So that's what anybody's anxiety curve looks like. Yours, mine, theirs. The trick to it is, as the adult or parent, our job is not to join in that chaos, but to stay at that barely curve that is at the bottom of the bell curve. I don't know if you can see that. This is where you have to be. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. If you can stay there, then you stand a pretty good chance of not escalating the behavior that you are seeing begin. Okay, so to help students when there is that initial trigger, right, you can use several things. You start to see that, or in advance that maybe the check your schedule is going to be a trigger for the student. You could remind them, we're going to check your schedule, and after we check your schedule, we're going to do something else. Or remember, it's math time. After math, we're going to get to take a break. So sometimes a first then visual might be helpful. Sometimes something like this 5-minute warning might be helpful to let them see visually and to prime them. This is how much time you have so that there are no surprises, right? No one likes to be kind of plucked off of a preferred activity, and these are ways that you can help them make that transition a little gentler. Okay, so agitation, after the trigger happens, the agitation may begin. And during that part of the curve, they're going to look a little bit anxious. They're going to begin to look worried. They're going to begin to look angry. It is very important for you to help school personnel understand and recognize these signs and symptoms, because this is the best shot you have to keep the behavior from escalating. So know what your child looks like at this phase so that they can do the right things, right? They might be withdrawn, they might be depressed, they might just get quiet, there might be a certain look. So these are the things to pay attention to, because this is key data for your team to have. So some of the strategies that you'll want to use during that time is empathy for one thing. You can say things like, "I know this is difficult for you. I know this is not your favorite thing to do, but we just have a little bit. And when we're done, that first then, and when we're done, we can do something you like to do, right? Or when you're done, I'll give you a choice of what you want to do." Provide space, like don't be too hovering because they're already beginning to get upset. Um, you don't want to, I got to get rid of my picture so I can see. You don't want to do that. You don't want to stand in too close. You want to just provide some assurances. We're almost done. You're doing a great job. You're hanging in, that kind of stuff. So some other things that you might do is it might be that you're able to infuse one of their preferences in what they're able to do. So something that they would be attracted to or they would find preferred. You might want to provide some movement activities. I know this is stressful for you. Let's get up and stretch for a minute. Maybe you give them a minute or two to draw or do something else. Again, setting that timer so that it's clear what those limits are going to be and they're prepared for how long they'll have. And then some self-regulation strategies. Some breathing, the flower candle, smell the flower, blow out the candle, or the rainbow relaxation where they follow the rainbow. For little kids, they take a breath in and then they hold it and then breathe out. So those kinds of strategies when that anxiety and that agitation first starts. Then as they move up that bell curve, if things don't go well at that phase and it continues to go up to towards the 5, again, what does that look like? What does your child look like when that's happening? How do you know that these strategies that you're using initially are not working? And that's just very, very individualized what that looks like. It can be refusals. It can be just some minor property things like maybe they flick the paper off the desk or they, throw something. So you just need to know what those are in your child and communicate those to your school. This is your last chance to kind of escalate before it starts to go peak. So these are some things that you can do. What I see a lot and what I did as a parent a lot was you get a little louder and you prompt verbally even more, and that oftentimes is more of an incentive for them to continue to escalate than anything else. So you want to be calm, you want to be respectful, you want to be detached, you want to be that barely curved line at the bottom. And if you approach them, it doesn't need to be confrontational. Tracy and I also see in schools that typical disciplinarian thing. I'm going to get a little louder. I'm going to move in and intimidate you by proximity. And I'm the adult here and you will do what I'm telling you to do. Well, what you're modeling in that case is aggression that you don't want to see in them. So again, non-confrontational. Again, I saw a beautiful job of this week. The student had thrown everything on the floor, and the teacher kind of just said, if you'll pick these up, then you can have a break. First pick these up, then you can have a break. So again, it was non-confrontational. She wasn't moving in. She was just setting some limits, and the student did do what she asked and got the break. So then if it does, you also want to model the behavior. Like I said, if you move in and have kind of bully adult behavior, you're modeling that bully behavior back. So you want to make sure that you're modeling calm, you're modeling acceptance, you're showing them what you want. And if you're lowering your voice, they will have to be quieter in order to hear what you're saying. You don't want to get into the volume battle. Respecting dignity is critical. I've done it. You may have done it. I see teachers do it. I don't know why every time this and this and this, and it turns into a little fussing. That's a no-no, especially at this stage. So you want to maintain a little detachment, communicate no emotions, no anxiety, and I know how hard that can be. Again, keep that straight line. That's your job, right? Is to try to stay at that bottom line. Okay, when you get to the top, the peak, the overall behavior is clearly out of control. I think everybody recognizes that in a student or a child. That's when physical aggression can start, verbal aggression, crying, property destruction, and in some kids, usually this degree of anxiety is fairly short phase, which is the good part, right? So the first thing about when and if it gets to that 5 peak is to manage our own behavior, right? So here's some things that we can do. You want to stay calm. We talked about that. Try to manage your own tension. You might you want to narrate your own things that you're doing. You know, I feel myself getting stressed. I'm going to take some deep breaths here. Not so much to him, but to or her, but to yourself. Limiting direct eye contact, respecting space, right? You don't want to move in and further intimidate because that's just going to tend to escalate that behavior. And then suspending judgment. In that heat of the moment, you don't want to make a decision or a judgment about why it's happening or whatever. Everyone needs a little space and a little time to look back at what happened and kind of, do what we're going to talk about in a minute, a social autopsy about what happened. Okay, so again, you want to give them your attention. You want to let them know that you want to be with them, but not necessarily doing a lot of talking to them. Remaining non-judgmental. You might want to validate their feelings. Again, kind of to yourself, to them. I know you were feeling this way. It's going to be okay. Allowing silence. Maybe you don't talk at all. And really using restatements to clarify the message. It's okay. It's okay. We can, it'll be fine in a minute. We're going to take some deep breaths. I'm going to take some deep breaths, and it's going to be fine in a minute. So this is very important as well when working with your school teams. If your child tends to get to that peak place when behavior starts, you really want to make sure that there is a crisis plan in place so that when it gets to that point, everybody knows what does that look like, what do we need to do, and what do we need to avoid. And how are we going to keep this? How are we going to keep your child safe, and how are we going to keep everyone safe? So this is again that curve, and we're going to talk now about the other side of it. So we've already peaked. We've talked about that. Now we're coming down to the kind of recovery phase. So that's called de-escalation as well. Overall behavior, they still might seem really a little confused and tired. They may be talking to you, trying to deny what happened, already starting to blame somebody else, maybe being apologetic. You just want to resist the urge to start rehashing at that point. You might do some reflective listening, be empathic, but you don't really want to start talking about the incident as of yet. You want to give them time to finish calming. Again, you might want to do whatever breathing exercises, do them yourself. Give them space and give them a little bit of time. And then we get to recovery. So what it can look like is they may not want to talk to you still. They may be very tired and they may be a little subdued. But at this point, you can debrief, okay? They're totally calm, and you can debrief what happened without the risk of sending them back up on the curve. So you want to identify the sequence of events. What did you do? Why did you do it? What could you do next time? What could I do next time? So we're going to look at something that we use and that you can also use with your students and children. I say students with your children. Duh. Okay, so this is called a social autopsy. The one on the right is by Brenda Smith Miles, and she's also the person that does the incredible 5-point scale, which I'm going to show you real quick in a minute. And you saw that anxiety curve was also based on 5 points, right? 5 to the top and then back down to 1. So they can be used together. But this is a way to look at what happened, and it's designed to do with your child. And when we tell teachers, it's designed to do with the student. So you talk about what happened. What did they do that wasn't socially acceptable, right? So what happened could be what the antecedent or the trigger was. Maybe it was a disagreement with a sibling. Maybe the sibling took the iPad. Maybe that's what happened. And then, the child who was the offender, maybe smacked his sibling for taking the iPad, but you get the gist of it. So you can go through it and then you can talk about, well, who was hurt? You're trying to teach a little empathy in this. And what should you have done and what can you do next time? We took it for our guys who are either younger or non-readers. And actually, we have a version that's more age appropriate pictorially for older students who may be non-readers, but this is the one for little guys. So it's the same thing, and it's designed so they can circle and you can do it with them. The one that, so they can circle whatever it is they did, and it is a Word document. So if their offenses don't correspond to what's on here, you can change it. But you want to know that, talk with them about who they hurt. What did they feel at the time? Were they happy, sad, mad, whatever? What can they do now and what could they do next time? You can also use this kind of as a primer so that when you know that difficult situation is going to happen again, or maybe he's going to be with his sibling again with the iPad, and you can pull this out and say, remember what happened last time? Remember we talked about if that happens again, what are you going to do instead? And then you can review it and use it as a priming strategy. Okay, so this is the 5-point scale I talked about. There are several books by these people. I said Brenda Smith Miles. It's not Brenda Smith Miles did that social autopsy, but this is I'm Van Buren and somebody. I'm blanking right now, but there are several. They have 3 books on this, and this is just a way for you to make abstract things like stress and anxiety concrete by assigning numbers and colors to them. So you can do it any way you want. This is also the best way to do this is with the student. The one on the right, Allie, our coworker, did with a little guy. And I think now Allie wrote what he said, but he drew the pictures. So he was able to tell her what it feels like at those different levels to show her what it looks like, which is a great way for us to see what it must feel like. And then to tell her or to tell you or his teacher, what are some things you could do to help me when I'm there? So it's a great tool. Again, you're making abstract things concrete for your kids. This is in your Google Drive, and this is a great tool, and we use it quite a bit. There was a project at the Human Development Center that trained school psychologists. And this was one of the products that they came up with after conducting a lot of research. This is a 1-page tool back and front, and it is evidence-based, research-based content that you should see in an FBA and a BIP. And it's not a lot. I mean, as you can see, there's not that many things that are listed. Your behavior plan is by and large a teaching plan. Tracy talked about replacement behaviors. It is about the replacement behaviors and how you're going to teach them and how you're going to reward them. So it's not a consequence plan, right? It's a teaching plan. And so these are the things you want to see. We cannot go through them today, but they're pretty clear cut. And as Tracy said, if you pull it out and look at it and you have any questions at all about it, all you have to do is reach out to us and we will help you. The only other thing I want to say besides take a look at this when you have time is that if you have a behavior plan in place and your little guy or little girl is not ever earning the reinforcer, then the plan will never work. And there are only 3 reasons why they should, if they tell you, well, they never earn their reinforcer, then you look at 3 things. Number 1, the reinforcer is no longer rewarding. It's not working. So we need to look at something different. Encourage them to do a preference assessment, or you do one at home and send them some ideas for something else to use. The second reason they never earn their reinforcer is because they don't get it till Friday. We see that a lot. And it's just not worth the effort. They have to behave 5 days before that reinforcer comes. They may not even remember it's coming. So the second thing is it's not happening frequently enough. The third reason they don't earn their reinforcer is because they don't have the capability of producing the behavior they're being asked to produce. So that means they need more support to be successful in being able to do that behavior. They either need more prompting or they need it broken up into smaller steps that they can learn one at a time. So that's, I didn't do a slide. I thought about that driving in the car and I was like, oh, I should have put that in there. But that's your troubleshooting strategy, is to look at the reinforcer and what it is, how it's being delivered, and then whether all the scaffolding or stepwise breaking up of things is happening with your child. Communication tips, and I have 1 minute. So just being very positive. Tracy, move down. You have to be a detective. We've got in trying to discern maybe why some of the things they're saying when you go to these meetings about your behavior plan. You want to make sure you clarify any information that is unclear. And we've given you some sample scripts that you can use, because I know, like my friend said, if you want me to stay unemotional, then let's talk about the weather, because if they're talking about my kid, I'm going to get emotional. So these are some scripts that you might even want to take with you on a piece of paper. When you start to feel heated, remember there's another way to ask it. So basically, asking them, what have you tried? You can go pretty fast. You can say, when you ask those kind of clarifying questions, it keeps that communication open and going back and forth, right? So you want to know that you want them to know that you're still engaged, you're still involved. When you ask those questions, it just promotes communication and relationship building. And again, we've got some scripts for you. You also can ask some probing questions in a way that may not be as intimidating and in a way that you may get more forthcoming information. What would it take to have peers help Kelly with transition? Share an idea that you have and ask what would happen if that idea was implemented. If something has happened that you don't understand, you can say something like, can you help me understand why that was done that way? Or something like, what are your concerns about trying this strategy if you're reaching some resistance? Choosing your words, keeping the focus on your child, right? He needs to be able to communicate his wants and needs in all environments. So that's his need. Rather than saying, I would like him to have speech 3 times a week, you can say he needs to communicate his wants and needs in all environments. And so what's it going to take? How are we going to go about making sure that happens? Go ahead. All right, so conflict is growth trying to happen. And I'm going to give you one last slide before I go ahead. This is one last slide before we open it up for questions. I found this a few years ago, actually. If you reach an impasse, this is a great way to decide just how much you disagree so that everybody gets registered and it doesn't just come to a stalemate. So this is a Likert scale that you can look at. So you might be in agreement, but you're not a 1. You're not really all that excited about it, but you might be at a 3 that you can live with the decision. And when are we going to come back to see if it's working? So this is just a strategy for getting unstuck. I believe it's in your Google Drive. If not, you have this slide presentation as well, and you can pull it back up and look at it. So you might find this useful in some of your meetings, and a little bit of progress each day adds up to big results. And so we hope you find this helpful. So today we talked about all those things, behavior basics. We talked about FBAs and BIPs, and now we want you to take a minute to do the self-assessment, and then we will open it up for questions and answers. And you guys can use the chat box, or you can just unmute yourself and talk to us.
All right, does anyone have any questions? Let's see, I have a couple in the chat box. Let me see. How do we had some come on late? Would you mind putting up the QR code for the Google Drive again?
Absolutely.
I missed it as well because my phone would not cooperate while it was up there. So
No problem. And I can also put that link in the chat for you guys. But here it is.
then we just have comments. Love, love, love all the great information presented. Thank you. The information was well spoken.
And again, you guys don't hesitate to reach out to us. And actually, we do have a Facebook page, and we do free webinars once a month, like a lunch and learn. So it's just 30 minutes. And I know you guys are all busy with your kids and your work lives or whatever. If you register for one of those lunch and learns and you can't go to it in real time, we will send you the PowerPoint. So be sure to keep track of us on Facebook and the free stuff that we do. Go to the website, like Tracy said. We have lots of visual supports for school and home. You can use them at home and share them with your school teams. They're printable and ready to use.
And I see you all have the QR code for your survey on the screen. Everyone, if you wouldn't mind just checking out their survey and completing that for them. For our survey, I dropped it in the chat box. There's a link for ours in the chat box. If you could grab that when you're done, I would appreciate it. And again, I know these things seem a little tedious, but like I said earlier, they keep our trainings going and they keep them free. They keep me in a job, which I happen to really like. All right. I really appreciated the way that all these tips are good for school, but they're also things that we can use at home. So I appreciated that.
And here's our contact information. Again, go to our Facebook page for sure and see what all's available to you. And again, for those of you who joined late, Tracy went over a little bit on our website. There are resources for home specifically on there too, visual supports that you can use. So be sure to check that out. We love free.
Amen. All right. I do have one brief question, and this is about school. This is not about individuals at home. Um, I mean, I guess it could be, but what if you have, I mean, I'm thinking about middle schoolers, and what if you have behaviors that, kids, the consequences that your peers are laughing at you, but you can't separate them. They're playing off each other. They're feeding each other. What are some tips on, stopping those kinds of behaviors from happening in a classroom?
I have a little bit to say, Trace, and I'll turn it over to you. I I have worked with individuals where that was the case. And so one of the things we did was talking about friendships, what friends are. I mean, I don't know how we wrote social stories. We looked at what makes a good friend, having conversations like that, and how do you tell when somebody's your friend? And one of the things that friends don't do is try to encourage you to do things that are going to get you in trouble. And so, just looking at that and trying to help them look more specifically, are those really your friends, kind of thing. Um, Schools should also be aware of that, hopefully, because it's not bullying per se, but it's kind of borderline because they're encouraging the student to do things that are going to get them in trouble. And so that would be something I'd want the school to be aware of as well. Um, and talking
Another
with the bystanders.
Another couple of things that I've recommended, because I do run through into that a lot in middle school and junior high, as well as like freshmen in high school, is can also sort of fall into that. Peers are really important. So giving them jobs, they want to be usually underlying for that function is that they're getting attention from their peers, and that's what they want. They also may want to be kind of the leader and the center of attention. So giving them a job that also gives them that function, like controlling the computer. Most of the classrooms today will have those, big screens and smart boards in the front. They can control that. If they behave a certain way for a certain amount of time and they don't make the students laugh, they can earn a class reward for the entire class, like a quick dance party, like a quick break, like something. We have 50 free reinforcers and ways to give them that sort of attention in more constructive ways, as opposed to just making students laugh. They can sort of lead their class into earning prizes, which gives them that same attention. It's been pretty successful.
That's a good point, Tracy. You really want to find another way for them to get that feel good feeling that their peers are appreciating them in a
Mhm.
way that's positive.
I like that, earning a class reward.
Hmm. That
That
gives
is-
them status.
yeah, and it gets the peers all kind of working with them. We want the reward.
It
Hmm.
does. And on our website, we have some, they're actually labeled, I think, as class. I'm not exactly sure how they're labeled, but you can see them on there, and they're puzzles. And there's like 6 different pieces, and one of them is all the students dancing. And you would basically give the student a puzzle piece, or you could even rotate it around to different students in your class. But what you're really going for is that student not acting out, but it's going to be a whole class participation for meeting behavior expectations that you give them, that you lay out for them and prime them with. And then you hand out a piece of the puzzle. Once they get all 6 pieces, they put the puzzle together and they get a dance break for however long. And that particular student maybe gets to choose what the song is, that kind of thing. YouTube and Spotify, as I'm not sure what streaming services, most schools are allowed to use some form of YouTube, but Spotify also have clean versions of very popular music that the kids like today.
Well, I have enjoyed the presentation. I wonder if anyone else has any questions or comments before we go. Well, ladies, thank you so much for your time. I very much appreciate it. And I will look forward to going through the Google Drive and checking some things out and further exploring the website and sharing those with my colleagues and with families. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're
Yep.
welcome, and be sure to take advantage of our lunch and learns. They're really quick and good functional tips.
Very good. Thank you all. Have a great day.
All right,
You
thanks for
too.
having us.
Thanks for having us.
Bye.